So this is my GSC NU viability rankings as of June 2023, featuring the greatest Pokemon theme of all time, Arctozel Silver Virgin Forest. I genuinely love this theme. I think it's a masterpiece, but whatever. Right. On to the main focus. It's ordered from left to right, meaning that like the left Pokemon are more viable than the right, but yeah, the order does get a little funky near the end, but whatever. Here we go. Weezing. Weezing is pretty absurd and is in my opinion the best one in the tier. So what does it do? It's the tier's primary physical tank, and where it's a good choice, oh god, there's several. First of all, Explosion. Explosion in GSC is, in my opinion, the third best move in the game, and is very, very absurd. Like, if you look at some of the GSC OU viability rankings, I mean GSC OU like teams, yeah, see, this team alone is centered around using like 3 Pokemon with Explosion. Explosion enables a lot of offense in the tier, and in like any GSC tier mainly, and except for kind of UU, but even then, Explosion is very, very valuable in that tier. But yeah, Weezing. Explosion is not its only good trait. It's difficult to switch into its stabs and coverage. Like Sludge Bomb, like that's commonly known as a kind of a bad stab in the higher tiers in OU. Like if you look at NU, right? There are very few. There's only one Steel type, Magnemite, which is pretty bad. Only one Ghost type, Ghastly, which is very bad. The ground types of the tier are very good, like Dugtrio. Like if you look at the PR, we have Dugtrio, we have Graveler, Sudowoodo, Pupitar, and Sudowoodo, which isn't a ground, but it resists Sludge Bomb. They're all very good Pokemon, but they have a lot of flaws that make them. There are flaws that make it difficult for them to stand up to Sludge Bomb. Like none of these 4 rocks and grounds run Rest Talk very often. Like so, oftentimes these. So as soon as they get hit by a Sludge Bomb poison, it's over for them. They're going to like slowly get worn down by all the spikes and Sludge Bomb poisons until they eventually collapse. Plus, Weezing doesn't even need to rely on that. It can instead run Hidden Power Water and just immediately blow them away. Plus, if we look at some of these aforementioned Pokemon, Dugtrio is quite frail and takes a decent chunk from Fire Blast, so if Weezing can just predict it, and then all of a sudden it's going to really struggle to switch into it again. Graveler and these two just instantly got the Hidden Power Water, so they need to scout for it. And Sudowoodo, by the way, is not immune to Thunder like the ground types are. So, and it also struggles to take multiple Thunders over the course of the game. So yeah, Weezing's Sludge Bomb is pretty absurd, and Thunder. It may seem ironic that like Thunder is the most important coverage move, because in the higher tiers you're going to want like Fire Blast for steals or some sort of water move for the ground, but Thunder is, and while Weezing does obviously use those 2 moves, Thunder is the more important one here, because if you look at the VR, again, like there are 2 very, very good water types that are on pretty much every series team as far as I know, and more importantly, Xatu. Xatu revenge kills Weezing, and thus Weezing needs to prevent it from switching in, and thus Thunder. Thunder has a 30% chance to inflict paralysis, including the chance, if we factor in the chance for it to miss, then if Xatu's switching into a Weezing Thunder, it has a 21% chance of getting paralyzed. And because Xatu gets 2 KO'd, what that essentially means is that there's essentially a 21% chance for Weezing to just flat out have the upper hand in the 1v1, because after that it just Thunders again and then Xatu drops. being able to do that against your best check is very absurd, and it severely limits the amount of Pokemon in the tier that can switch into it. So, Weezing isn't. So why is it number one? So why specifically is it the number one? Because if you know anything about GSC NU, you kind of know that like for like a majority of the tier's lifespan, Xatu was considered number one, and most players are probably still going to be considering it the number one today. Like, but I honestly do feel as if like what Weezing does is like too good. Is like Weezing's like ceiling is simply like too high, and the main argument I do see against Weezing being number one is kind of like more so it's like floor, and the concept of like floors and ceilings is Pokemon's floors and ceilings is something that I'm going to be talking about a lot in this VR. Like I think I do base a lot of my VR decisions based on like how high are their floors and ceilings. And Weezing does have a notable floor due to struggling with its last move slot. Because if it drops Fire Blast, then Pineco is more safe against it and can get up Spike, and it's really dangerous to give Pineco turns because this thing spikes, this thing's rapid spins your own spikes, and this thing explodes. And then, but if you chose Fire Blast and then dropped Hidden Power Water, then the Rock Ground types are gonna be a pain for you. Especially Graveler, who spins away the spikes that Weezing loves so much. And even once it gets past all that, there's still obviously the issue of like Xatu plus Dugtrio, and two of its best checks being two of the best Pokemon in the tier. Two of the other best Pokemon in the tier. But Weezing has ways around these Pokemon. Even regardless of which last move it chooses. Like, I just soon see that, I just soon see it was like the Fearow, right? Like, when you get Pokemon as dangerous as Fearow and Weezing, struggling with the rock type of the tier may as well just be a minor inconvenience, because there are plenty of ways to deal with the prominence of these. For Weezing, the most straightforward is obviously to use Hidden Power Water, but if you're not using Hidden Power Water, then what else can you do? Well, first off, there's Pineco. Toxic Pineco, to be more specific. The best rock in the tier is Graveler, and it's by a fairly long shot. Like there used to be a debate on where it used to be kind of close to which one of Graveler or Sudowoodo was better. I never understood that. I think Graveler is very clearly better. And at this point, I don't think it's a contest. But whatever. Graveler, it rapid spins, so it's going to be wanting to switch into Pineco so that it can actually remove its spikes. But then, Pineco just slaps on Toxic, and then immediately cripples it. Obviously, Toxic doesn't instantly one-shot Graveler, but what it's going to do is that it's going to mean that it gets slowly worn down over the course of a game, and meaning that it's going to be taking damage every time it switches in. So eventually it's just going to fall in the face of repeated sludge bombs and poisons. And if it chooses to not switch into Pineco, then spikes are going to add up for its team, and then it's going to struggle to switch into Weezing and especially Fearow. Yeah, and then obviously the other two rocks aren't going to be switching into Pineco since they don't have rapid spin, but Sudowoodo, as mentioned before, isn't a ground type, so it's going to get worn down by repeated thunders. And Pupitar, despite quarter resisting Sludge Bomb, is going to be taking spikes damage, and so it's definitely more vulnerable to Sludge Bomb poisons than Graveler is. Also, Pupitar is generally kind of rare nowadays, but I mean, it's having a surge in popularity. A lot of people are really liking it right now, including me. But yeah. And then as for say you choose to run Hidden Power Water, choose to drop Hidden Power Water, and instead run Fire Blast. Let's say you choose to run Hidden Power Water and decide to drop Fire Blast. Now now you have to face the daunting prospect of letting Pineco into Spike or Spin. Well, there's goal factors here. Sorry. One, Weezing on the offensive teams that Weezing usually really like having Weezing. Pineco is usually going to have a hard time finding opportunities against Weezing and its team. So it's usually going to have to accept having to take like a big hit. Which means that before Weezing even reveals itself, Pineco is going to be worn down to where it's not going to be able to switch into Weezing again. And even if it doesn't, like, Pineco isn't going to want to risk the possibility of Weezing having Fire Blast, so it's not going to want to switch into Weezing, and Weezing can even switch into it at times and immediately force it out under the threat of Fire Blast. You could bluff Fire Blast even if you don't have it. So that's another caveat. And it's also a similar thing for Graveler, Pupitar, and Sudowoodo. Like, they're not going to want to risk you having Hidden Power Water, so they're going to want to immediately switch out. So they're also not going to want to like immediately switch out of you in fear of Hidden Power Water. And everything we've been saying is, if Weezing faces like some of its worst matchups, like, obviously it does still have a couple of other bad ones, like Ninetales and Dewgong, like, are real big issues for it, but Ninetales A is fairly limited in terms of viability. Like, it's pretty flawed. There's a reason why I only have it at B rank. I personally like it more than a lot of people do, but yeah, it has a lot of flaws. And also, like, you can also like turn that into your advantage by exploding on it, and then now all of a sudden your opponent doesn't have one of the best Xatu walls in the game, in the tier. It's a similar dynamic for Dugtrio as well. Where exploding on it, lets Xatu go berserk. And Dugtrio has it even worse, because like, it's really scared of Weezing's Thunder. Especially if it spikes up and if it's weakened before from, like, say, chucking Xatu. I guess, like, what my conclusion ultimately is that even on Weezing's worst day, it makes really big stuff happen. Like, exploding on Ninetales and Gloom, Ninetales and Dewgong, I mean, is huge. Like, because that opens up a path for your own Xatu. Wearing down, like, Graveler, Sudowoodo, and Pupitar with Slowdown poisons opens the way for something like Fearow, for example. And so, if that's is Weezing on its worst day, imagine what it could do on its best day. And on its best day, it's going to switch into the many Pokemon that it switched into, and then Weezing, and that's another thing, Weezing has insane defensive utility in this tier. Like, checking Primeape is a big deal. Like, this thing is very difficult for most teams to handle without Weezing. The difference in how a team handles Primeape when it has Weezing versus when it doesn't is pretty absurd, and yeah. And Primeape can often be like very, very annoying to switch into without Weezing. And then, other than Weezing, we have, it can emergency switch into, it doesn't quite hard counter anything. And other than Primeape and Hitmonlee, it doesn't hard counter as much in the tier, but like, it emergency checks a lot of really good mons. Fearow, it can emergency check Fearow. It can emergency check Wigglytuff. Like Weezing Explosion is a big reason why like Wigglytuff isn't as broken as Cursed Wigglytuff isn't as broken as it may seem, because Cursed Wigglytuff has to constantly deal with the fact that like Weezing can just switch in and just blow up on it and immediately halt its sleep. So, and then like if you like catch it while it's sleeping, then it's gonna be a really rough time. It's sleeping, and then like it's gonna be a really rough time for the Wiggly user. And it can also emergency step Persian, Kingler, Porygon in the pinch, and also Dunsparce as well. Yeah, it also like it outspeeds like Stantler after a curse and then just explodes on it. Yeah, there's a lot of Pokemon that Weezing can just provide you with a safety net versus. So, and like having Weezing on your team is just gives like a really good sense of security. And then once it switches into one of the many pokes it threatens out, like Primeape and Hitmonlee, it fires off deadly attacks that is not well resisted within the tier. It doesn't even need to rely on switching into Pokemon that like it scares out. Like Rest is very common in the tier, so like if you could get in on that, then it could go ham. Like it can get coming in on a Pineco that uses spikes and threaten it out with the risk of Fire Blast, and then like hit something on the switch. It can, and no matter what, it always has Explosion. So like if something like say a Xatu or Dugtrio, like exploding on Dugtrio is really good against offensive teams, because especially if you have like and it can be abused if you have Pokemon like say Chinchou, Magnemite, or Fire type. And yeah, there are just like so many like really good ways you could pair Weezing up to just cause destruction. Like Weezing plus Weezing plus Restock Stantler is a really good combo, because Restock Stantler struggles with Primeape, so Weezing deals with that. While Weezing struggles to deal with Dewgong, so Stantler comes around and just PB stalls the shit out of it. And then you have two of the most dangerous physical threats in the tier. And then this combo just kind of goes ham. Weezing and Fearow both work together to Fearow takes advantage of Weezing poisoning the rock types, and both are also obviously two of the most dangerous defensive threats in the tier. Weezing just pairs well with like really anything, honestly. Like anything that abuses spikes or is a normal type really loves Weezing. And all this I haven't even mentioned like what some of the other lost moves it can run. It can run Haze to like really shut down Wigglytuff. It can run Curse. I've heard some people like Pain Split. I don't really like it, but you can also probably find use for like Protect for extra leftovers recovery. Weezing just you can even just run Deef really. Yeah, so I think like Deef might have some potential. Weezing just does it all really. I think it on like a good day is I don't think it's full. I think Weezing on a good day is just, to put it, for lack of a better word, absurd. And I think its flaws are some of the most are extremely lukewarm in the tier, to the point where they're more or less just minor inconveniences, honestly. Xatu. Next up is Xatu. So, Xatu, for a long time, was considered to be the undisputed #1 in the tier. And probably most people you ask will probably say that it is firmly #1. Like, it's not exactly a popular opinion for Weezing to be #1, actually. Like, I think, like, me, Dawn, like Mr. Soup, I think it's #1. But Xatu is pretty more popular opinion of it not being #1. Xatu's dominance in the tier is a very good kind of dominance, honestly. Like, it's all, like, think of it like, kind of like GSC Snorlax. It's not, like, as, like, meta-defining as GSC Lax. Like, it's not, like, absolutely mandatory on a team, like, on any, like, serious team, but, like, it's similar to Lax in the sense that it prevents some of the most dangerous threats in the tier from being broken. Like Weezing, like, Xatu is one of very few Pokemon in the tier that can consistently revenge kill Weezing. It runs out Dugtrio. It can check Dugtrio in a pinch. If it switches, it heavily discourages Dugtrio from just spamming Earthquake, which would otherwise be, like, won't be very safe for it if it wasn't for Xatu, and, like, to a lesser degree Fearow. It checks Primeape, which is huge, Kingler, and, like, a lot of these threats, especially Weezing, Primeape, and Kingler, would probably be broken in tier without Xatu. So, and Xatu just kinda gives the tier an all-purpose revenge killer. Like, when it comes to, like, being a fast special attacker, you don't get any better than Xatu. Like, what else are you gonna do? Like, fucking Magmar, Ninetales? Yeah, like, Xatu's just great. It's one of the best progress makers in the tier. Xatu's Psychic with Spikes Up just drains everything in the tier. Like, there's a whopping 2 Dark and Steel types in the tier, and not counting, like, Chipmunk Sneasel, but sorry Gluten, I know you love it, but whatever. And this is a common trend you'll see in, like, a lot of, like, old gen lower tiers, because Dark and Steel types are not very common, like, especially in the older generations, and especially Steel types are very heavily needed by the higher tiers. So in lower tiers, like, Psychic types tend to dominate because of that. Like, in Gen 3 NU there's Pineco, in Gen 4 NU there's, like, Espeon got banned. Gen 5 NU had Jinx banned, and etc. You get the point. Psychic types are pretty powerful in the lower tiers. And Xatu, checking Xatu can get, like, very, very dicey with Spikes Up, because all the Pokemon with the exception of, like, Ninetales, like, all the Pokemon that can comfortably switch into its Psychic are slower than it. Like, Persian and Fearow could do it, like, decently, but, like, both aren't, like, great. Especially since both rely on double-edged recoil. And so, which means that, like, Xatu is very, very good at forcing Pokemon to rest. And that gives, and that can be abused in several ways. And plus, not to mention, like, the Pokemon that truly, like, are, like, get like, genuinely, like, hard counters, quote-unquote, like, hard counters Xatu, like, which is, like, Dewgong and like, Ninetales, like, both of them, like, being able to do so purely because of their bulk, are passive mons that can be exploited in numerous ways. like you force these two to rest, and then like you force like these two, especially Dewgong, to rest. Then you have Curse Light Screen Stantler who just comes in and like, hey bitch, I'm gonna set up a light screen and then a million curses on you. Have a lot of fun. Like, and certainly not the only way. Like Primeape really loves arresting Dewgong. Of course, Wigglytuff, one of the most unfair mons in the tier, honestly. Kingler, Source Dance Kingler, Chinchou, Curse Porygon as well, and like there are a lot of ways to just abuse. It's like Xatu doesn't really like 6-0 teams on its own, like, and especially with like Dewgong and Ninetales in the tier, like Dewgong and Ninetales in the tier, and but like, and even without those, like a lot of Pokemon that are like 3 KO'd by it and have like rest talk can handle it. But like it's so good at just like forcing rest, forcing progress, forcing like passive plays from your opponent, that like its teammates can like kind of just go ham on them. It's a little dicey for Octillery. Like Octillery like hardly counts as Xatu switch, honestly, but like it is slightly harder to take advantage of. It's harder to take advantage of arresting Octillery than it is with Dewgong, because Octillery is much stronger. But turns out Octillery has way worse bulk than Dewgong, meaning that it hardly counts as a Xatu check and just kind of just takes a shit ton from its psychic. So yeah, Xatu's amazing. It influences a lot of team building and plays in the meta. Like Dugtrio runs substitutes solely so that it doesn't need to guess when Xatu's putting in. Like maybe not solely, but like Xatu's a big reason why it runs sub. Fearow is so good, largely because it outspeeds Xatu and can revenge kill it. Graveler needs to be like really careful with his Earthquake because it doesn't run sub and it could just give Xatu a free switch. And it's also one of the reasons why like it also like is a big it's a big roadblock to the viability of mons like Gloom and Hitmonlee, because both seriously struggle with Xatu. It's also the sole reason why Houndour, Magnemite, and like Sneasel are viable, because and like Exeggcute to a lesser degree. Well, maybe not Exeggcute, but I digress. Anyways, this is basically a standard type you're gonna see. You pretty much never deviate from like Psychic, Hidden Power, Rest, and Sick Talk. The main choice you have with Xatu is Hidden Power Ice or Hidden Power Electric. Both have their ups and downs. Hidden Power Ice is nice against Dugtrio because it guarantees good sleep talk rolls versus Dugtrio, which is oftentimes a very difficult mon to deal with otherwise. Personally though, I think Hidden Power Electric is the best. Like, I think just having a good sleep talk roll against Octillery and Dewgong is a bit too crucial to give up. In fact, both of these moves' purposes is actually just to hit other Xatu, by the way. Like, it sounds silly, but it sounds pretty silly at first, but like having your own Xatu be walled by the opponent's Xatu is too bad to like just have. So like, yeah, and it really does speak to how dominant it is when it runs super effective hidden powers to hit itself. So yeah, Xatu is like the best progress maker in the tier. It just does it all, really. It's defense, it holds the tier together, it against some of the most dangerous mons in the tier, it makes progress, yeah, there's a reason why Xatu Dugtrio spikes are the more dominant teams now in the meta. And another thing I should mention about Weezing, another thing I mentioned that like part of the reason why I don't think Xatu is number 1 compared to Weezing is that like Xatu's role is somewhat replicable by Fearow. Like, some teams have been experimented with replacing Xatu with Fearow, and to decent success, because Fearow does a lot more damage with its higher attack and double edge, and is faster than Xatu as well. These commonly come in the form of normal spam teams. Although these teams do kind of have their struggles, like they kind of need to be a hyper offense. They kind of need to like win before their opponent does, because without Xatu, they're gonna struggle against Weezing, Kingler, and to a somewhat lesser degree Primeape. But the fact that Xatu's role is replicable makes it slightly worse than Weezing in my opinion. Like, as well as Octillery too, because Octillery can be replicated by Dewgong, and arguably much more effectively than Xatu's role can be replicated by Fearow. Weezing, on the other hand, like, nothing really does what it does. Like, yeah, Gloom checks the fighting types, but can Gloom explode? Is Gloom one of the most dangerous offensive mons in the tier? I don't think so. And other than that, like, well, we have like Chipmunk, Ghastly. It can't really do anything that Weezing. It can't really replicate Weezing. Like, no, just forget it. Yeah, Weezing. Yeah, Weezing is basically irreplicable, while Xatu and Octillery are. So, next, speaking of Octillery. Octillery has the highest special attack stat in the tier, 105, and Stab Surf. Bulky Water is pretty much the prominent. It is like one of the most iconic types of Pokemon that like ever. In OU, they're slightly less. In GSC OU, they're slightly less prominent because they have two broken electric types, Zapdos and Raikou, but in the lower tiers, there is none, and thus Octillery is, and Dewgong, dominate. And Octillery is widely considered to be the better of the two between Octillery and Dewgong, and that's because it is very, very strong. Like, Surf, Octillery is like, Octillery doesn't like clean up as easily as Xatu does because it's very, very slow. But it is almost as, if not more, threatening to switch into. Its Surf just kind of has, its Surf and Ice Beam or Surf or Hidden Power Electric just has amazing coverage in the tier. And most of the Pokemon that I can comfortably switch into it usually are fairly passive. Like, Dewgong can switch into it very well, but like, as I mentioned in the Xatu section, it's fairly passive. And Chinchou's like the only Pokemon that can like switch into Octillery and consistently force it out, but like Chinchou has its own issues and it's not in every team. And plus, Chinchou also can let in Pokemon like Wigglytuff. And there are many ways of abusing the pokes that Octillery struggles to handle. And it's well worth it because its Surf just kind of ravages everything in the tier. And its weaknesses are fairly hard to prey on. Like most Pokemon, there aren't that many Pokemon that just like run like super strong moves to hit it with. Like part of like why Weezing, like Thunder is so important to Weezing is to hit Octillery super hard. Just to give some further perspective on just how important Octillery is. And beyond that, not much else, just hits it for super effective damage, so it's or like big damage, and as you've seen in the aforementioned example of Weezing, like yeah, sure, Weezing can hit it like super hard, but is it switching in? Not a chance. Like that start does too much, and Weezing's hit health is very, very valuable. Other Pokemon that could do a big damage to it, like Fearow, hate switching in, and it is generally very, very difficult to switch into. Like Wigglytuff, for example, like Wigglytuff, like who is a solid switch into Dewgong, like absolutely cannot switch into Octillery, for example. And it stays healthy throughout the game with Restock, and it has plenty of Pokemon that can check decently. Just like Xatu, it also checks a lot of Pokemon decently. Like the fire types, Octillery is the biggest obstacle standing in the way of fire types and viability. Like Ninetales and Rapidash really hate Octillery, and it's the main reason why for their fall in popularity, their main reason for their downfall. The rock types often aim to like explode on Octillery to open the way for his other teammates, and also it switch into Dugtrio. It doesn't switch into it doesn't switch into Dugtrio like really. It doesn't switch into a lot of these Pokemon except for the fire types. It doesn't switch into super well, especially not Dugtrio. If it's but like for a Pokemon that's as threatening as it is offensively, being able to having this much options to switch into is absolutely lovely. It's kind of similar to what I said for Xatu. Like, yeah, sure, Xatu and Weezing. Like, yeah, sure, it's similar dynamic with Xatu and Weezing. Like, yeah, sure, they don't switch in. The Pokemon they switch into, they don't do it like infinitely, and but like the fact that they could do it at all while being as offensively threatening as they are is just absolutely incredible. As for the last movie, the other moves Octillery can run is Hidden Power Electric or Ice Beam, and which one it chooses which one it chooses is very, very important and is heavily team dependent. Hidden Power Electric is better overall, ironically for other Octillery. Like, I think Octillery is great, and but being rolled by the opposing Hidden Power Electric Octillery is really, really bad. Like, you already have like one of the most difficult monsters to switch into in the tier, and then you don't letting in the most difficult monster to switch into an entire tier is very, very bad. So teams with Ice Beam Octillery often need another way of handling it, electric Octillery. Like say Gloom is a big one, Chinchou is a big one. Dewgong to a lesser degree, although I feel like if you're running Dewgong, Ice Beam Octillery is a little more pointless, but if you can make the room for Ice Beam Octillery, it is extremely good because it guarantees good support rolls against Dugtrio, and thus actually makes it good at checking it. Like, Electric Octillery just really sucks at checking Dugtrio. Like, it's only really gonna be switching into it if it's at full HP, and that isn't all often and isn't sleeping. So, in other words, not a lot of time. Like, if it's with Hidden Power Electric, then against a Dugtrio spamming sub, it's only 1 in 3 to get a good Sick-Type roll versus it, and after that, Dugtrio could just screech and then cause mayhem from there. But if you and considering that Dugtrio is so good to the point where at one point people were genuinely calling for its ban, Ice Beam can be very, very good safety net versus it. It also is much better against Xatu, and can also guarantee good Sick-Talk rolls against the rock ground types of the tier. Ice Beam Octillery overall, I'd say, has an overall higher ceiling than, like, say, than Hidden Power Electric Octillery. Especially because they can also fit for freezes, but I'd say that, like, the floor for Hidden Power Electric Octillery is way too low to justify it most of the time, unless you have a dedicated Electric Octillery counter like Gloom or Chinchou. I know Estarossa heavily preaches on Ice Beam Octillery, and he like thinks it's firmly the better one, but personally I just disagree. Next up, we have Stantler. If you ever want to scare a GSC NU player, just screenshot this set to them and send it. This thing haunts the nightmares of every GSC NU player ever, and is, in a nutshell, the single scariest Pokemon to be looking at full HP. So this set here is probably the biggest game ender in the tier, and is a phrase you'll commonly hear if you've ever dabbled in the GSC NU community at all is broken deer, and yeah, there's a reason why. So, basic premise of Stantler. It switches in as a special attacker, like it outspeeds like Octillery or Dewgong uses Rest, sets up Light Screen, and then sets up Curse, and then oftentimes the game is just like done, like right then and there. Like it gets 1 KO at minimum, and can oftentimes just sleep an unprepared team. It is pretty ridiculous. Earthquake its access to Earthquake is one of its most important attributes, letting it instantly crush Weezing. It doesn't need to play around against like the rock types of the tier. Yeah, and also hits the unviable Gas Leap, but whatever. But yeah, Stantler just ends games. It does need like a bit of support so that it can end the game, because like it can't just switch into a special attacker and just expect to just end the game right then and there, because like its bulk is pretty poor, and so it's good, and it takes a lot from mobile special attacks like Xatu's Psychic and Octillery's Surf, but if you set it up correctly, it's a little scarier. And once you set up a Curse, then like the amount of Pokemon that can reliably revenge kill you is severely limited. It's basically limited to just Primeape, but like A, Primeape's cross chop accuracy, B, Primeape's probably gonna die to a return, and C, Primeape is not on every team. Also, your next best option is to like try to like explode on it, is like Weezing or like Pineco. But not only does Stantler actually outspeeds Pineco after a Curse, so it can just like Curse up again and it'll take even less damage to the explosion. But yeah, this thing is like almost guaranteed a KO, like if you set it up properly. So, some people like legitimately think that like because of this set that like Stantler is like flat out broken, and they would support like a Stantler ban, but personally I don't think it's broken. I don't think it's like, no, I still think it's really fucking good, but like I don't think it's like overpowered, and like I wouldn't support a Stantler ban. I actually do think it brings positives to the tier, and I think the threat of its Curse Light Screen is a little overblown. Like, don't get me wrong, it's still really fucking threatening, but like there are caveats to it. Big one being is that like you can't really use it until like the late game, like unless you want to like kind of blow its chances of sleeping. Like you can't really use it to like switch into anything. You can't really use it, and you're gonna struggle to use it in like the early game, because you really need to preserve you really want to preserve your HP for the late game sleep. So unless you want to go for an early game kill, which can be valid definitely, or are willing to give up its opportunities for a sweep, then like it might end up feeling like a dead slot until you can secure the sweep. You don't always need, or until like you could like find it in, or until you can like find it in on like a Pokemon that like you can reliably set up light screen on and a couple curses. But and also like light screen in fact does not last forever. And then we have like the Lord and Savior of the tier, Xatu. Xatu can take a hit, always outspeed Stantler, can take a return, and threaten huge damage on it with Psychic. Stantler is another one of the Pokemon that's like kind of cut and check with Xatu, and like another Pokemon that would probably be broken without Xatu in it. So yeah, once Light Screen expires, if you can maneuver Xatu onto the field, and just like keep attacking it before Xatu comes in, then like you can stop a Stantler sweep, which is how like most teams are going to stop it. Most teams just kind of stop it by denying the game, denying it opportunities, or just like flat out like winning the game before Stantler gets an opportunity to like blow a big hole in your team. I'd say it's a lot dicier with like it's a lot easier to handle Stantler with like an offensive team because you have more opportunities to deny its setup, or like just win before it can. For dicier, for like more balanced or defensive teams, it is slightly dicier. Unless they're running a stall team with Shuckle, in which case it's no threat at all. But for more balanced teams, the likes of for more balanced teams, it's definitely dicier because they have a lot more like slower Pokemon. But even they still have options. Like Restock Primeape is like on like say like a Gravel Gloom balance teams that have been super popular lately. Restock Primeape is often used with them, so and it can stop it, and plus what move does Gravel have? Explosion, so it can oftentimes stop it that way. And there are a couple of other ways of handling it. Like most of the time, you just kind of handle it by just not letting it get set up, but it is. I can't, however, honestly see the argument that it's broken because it does like take advantage of like Pokemon like Dewgong like a bit too low sometimes. Dewgong and Octillery a bit too low, but ultimately I think it has about enough flaws to be balanced. And also another thing important to note is that this is not the only set it can run. It doesn't need to run a set that like aims to just win the game outright. Because Restock Stantler is viable. Well, not even just viable, just flat out fucking dominant, honestly. Restock normal types are very, very strong in this tier. And compared, like we have like Fearow, Wigglytuff, Persian, I don't. Restock's a little niche, but it still works. Dunsparce, and then there's Porygon, who technically doesn't use Restock, it uses Recover, but same difference really. Restock Stantler, compared to the other normal types, it sucks way more than Xatu. Like none of them are super great against Xatu, but like Stantler sucks really bad against it because like it runs Earthquake, meaning that it has a chance for a really bad Sleep Talk roll against it, and its Special Bulk just isn't that great, so it's going to take a huge chunk from Xatu's Psychic. So it's by far the worst of them against Xatu, but like beyond that, it's much better against like most other decks. It's one of the best Pokemon at taking advantage of Dewgong. Like, even though it doesn't concretely 3-hit KO it essentially just PP stalls it. And it can oftentimes get around like the risk of Ice Beam freezers thanks to using Rest on the Ice Beam. It can emergency switch into Weezing and in that with EQ. It can, and generally the kind of appeal of like Restock Stantler is that like it has all of like the destruction that like it has slightly less destruction that like the Curse Light Screens variant can cause, but like where's the advantage of being able to use it early game? Like switching it in, as I could say, like an Octillery uses Rest and then just firing off returns is real nice, and switching into Dewgong all day is also really nice because a lot of offensive teams really struggle to struggle to like take advantage of Dewgong, and it's generally just very difficult to switch into. Like normal ground coverage in GSC is just flat out broken. Like using Bolt Beam is good. Imagine normal ground coverage in GSC. 2 Pokemon in the entire game resist it, and both of them are not legal in NU, so bravo. Yes, that's Stantler for you. Broken ass deer. Pineco. What the hell? You know how I said Explosion was the 3rd best move in the game? Well, you know what's the best move in the game? Spikes. Spikes are meta-defining. Spikes are really what kind of just defines GSC as a whole, honestly. Like, pretty much every tier, except for like ZU and maybe PU, would be pretty much unplayable without Spikes. And to a lesser degree Explosion, GSC NU is very much like that. Spikes are amazing. Now, note how I say Spikes and not Pineco, because that's because Pineco, being an unevolved Shitmon, kind of sucks on its own. Its viability is entirely carried by Spikes. So, that means that its goal is to simply just get up to Spike, and so its entire goal relative is to just like get up Spikes, and it has some good attributes of its own that like make it slightly easier to handle to get that off. Like its physical bulk is just good enough to where like it can switch into Dugtrio. It can get Spikes on Dugtrio and like even some of the normal types of the tier like Wigglytuff, Porygon, Stantler to a degree, and Persian. Obviously it's not great at switching into any of them, but like a lot of them it's only like they're only 3-hit KO'd by it, so it can get Spikes up versus them. And you can also switch into a poke that uses like Rest and get up Spikes as they rest. Switch into a poke as they rest and just get up Spikes then. And also it can explode. And it's one Explosion being good for all the reasons I went over was Weezing. Pineco enables some of the most common team structures in the meta. Pretty much the most common team structure is Xatu, Dugtrio, Spikes, and Pineco enables the entire team style. Like Dugtrio is fairly mediocre without Spikes. Even Xatu can sometimes struggle without Spikes. Fearow is enabled a lot by Spikes, so what Pineco does is very, very important. The most important thing you got keep in mind with Pineco is Rapid Spinners. The main Rapid Spinner in the tier, Graveler. And Pineco needs a way to keep up Spikes long term versus Graveler, and especially with how much more common it's becoming. And the one way you do that is Toxic. Gravel switches into as it tries Rapid Spin away, and then you pop up in Toxic, and then Gravel's crippled. And then obviously it doesn't like, as mentioned before, it doesn't like OHKO Graveler, but like it ensures progress can be forced onto Graveler, and the spikes can more conceivably go up. Toxic Graveler isn't just good for itself. Like some Pokemon that struggle with Graveler, such as like namely Fearow, but like Fearow, non-Hidden Power Water Weezing, Cursed Wigglytuff, really love Pineco luring in and getting the Toxic on Graveler. If Graveler chooses not to switch into Pineco, then it's getting spikes up, and all of a sudden all of these Pokemon, especially Fearow and Weezing, just go berserk. And there's not, I guess there, and honestly beyond that, there's not a whole lot else to say. Like Rapid Spin, you don't always click, but like the times you do click it, you are very, very glad to be able to click it, because getting rid of opponent's spikes can be real nice. Other options include, before Toxic was popular, people used to mostly run Reflect, and that was mainly for Dugtrio, so Dugtrio doesn't just get up like a substitute for free on you, but with how common Gravelers being, it's kind of a lot more difficult to justify Reflect, and there's ways around Dugtrio, like other options include Hidden Power Water threatens Dugtrio while also getting a really good hit on Graveler, but it doesn't. But like unlike Toxic, it's not permanent on Graveler because Graveler still has leftovers, and I don't even know if Hidden Power Water breaks the sub. Let me check. I don't even think Hidden Power Water breaks the sub, so even less reason to run it. Giga Drain can be nice to lure in Graveler while healing off the HP, but in Generation 2, Giga Draining moves actually fail if behind the sub, on a poke behind the sub, so against Dugtrio it's pretty much useless, so yeah. Yeah, Pineco, spikes are dominant, spikes are good, yeah. I've heard from other people that sometimes they kind of struggle to use Pineco because you do need to get it in. Because if you're not going to get it in on the Pokemon that let it in, then like you're going to need to get it in on like a forced rest or a double switch. And it can definitely sometimes be annoying to use and try to get Pineco in, and it is very punishing if you get it wrong, because like if it takes a big hit, then it's not going to get spiked up later in the game, and suddenly you're at a huge disadvantage. But I guess you just gotta read your opponent, I guess. Next up, Fearow. Fearow is one of the scariest Pokemon to be looking at full HP. This thing is pretty absurd. Fearow outspeeds Xatu and Primeape, and Revenge kills both. Xatu alone will be huge, but Primeape is especially huge, especially because it's a normal type, and most normal types just tend to not like Primeape very much. So the fact that Fearow completely turns that matchup on the head is very unique for a normal type. And this thing is strong as fuck, and it's stronger than its attack set is technically lower than Stantler's, but thanks to having its access to Double Edge, compared to Stantler who doesn't get it, it did get it this gen, it's effectively stronger. Because base power tends to matter more, base power of your moves tends to matter more than the base attack stat of your moves, as Talonflame and Auras has shown. Yeah, and then like it's stronger than pretty much every other normal type. Wigglytuff, Persian, stronger than both. So and if I'm not mistaken, it actually has the strongest unboosted normal stab in the game. I mean, Skelly's gonna stab in GSC NU. And boy, does it abuse it well. This is a calc I always remember. Octillery has around, Hidden-Power Electric Octillery has around a 50% chance to be 2-hit KO'd by Double Edge with Spikes up, which for comparison Stantler can never achieve. And it only needs the slightest amount of chip damage to put Dewgong into KO range. It's also the same for Xatu. It only needs slight chip damage to get it into 2 KO range with Double Edge. And as a whole, like in the tier where like normal type attacks are so broken, having the strongest normal type attack is pretty absurd. And Dual Pack lets it revenge kill Primeape. Now, there is one big elephant in the room with Fearow, and that is the rock types. And Fearow really hates the rock types, and like, unlike Stantler, who can Earthquake it, Wigglytuff, who both A has coverage and B can just like curse up to where like it can more concretely drain them. Persian, who can launch Hypnosis on it, Fearow struggles to make progress against these rock types on its own. Graveler in particular is really fucking bad for it because it spins away the spikes that Fearow loads so much. And that can be really, and makes it harder to make progress on Graveler. And however, like as I've shown with the Weezing example, there are ways around it. Fearow definitely has it like way worse than Weezing because like at least Weezing can threaten like a Sludge Poison or like, and they also have to respect the possibility of Hidden Power Water on Weezing, but like with Fearow, they don't really need to do that. You can run Hidden Power Ground for them, but like it's Hidden Power Ground Fearow is kind of ass. But yeah, going back to the point, Fearow can get Fearow. There's a lot of ways to support Fearow to get around these rocks, like Toxic Pineco, as I mentioned before. But like another way I really like is Curse Wigglytuff, because these rock types, because like if one of the rock types like chooses to explode on Wigglytuff to stop a Curse Sweep, that means Fearow can go berserk. And Pupitar doesn't explode on Wigglytuff, but it can't spin away spikes and is much more fragile than Graveler, meaning that like it oftentimes just like struggles to take on multiple of Fearow's double edges. And yeah, so it's the rock type flaw is like overall like bigger than Weezing's. It's overall like it's overall mostly just a mild inconvenience in comparison to like this thing's threat level. Like, yeah, sure, its floor is overall lower than like most of the other offensive threats I mentioned earlier, but its ceiling is so high that like it's well worth going through the effort. Another issue with Fearow is kind of like Dewgong, because the thing with rest top normal types is that like they're usually tasked with handling Dewgong and Chinchou, because both of them are so passive, but since Fearow can't do that, it oftentimes needs to like fit in another rest top normal type to handle it, or something like rest top Hitmonlee or Gloom. Not Gloom for Dewgong, but or like Hitmonlee, but so it can be a bit of a strain to fill out for another team, especially with the aforementioned Graveler issue. It's a lot harder to fill out as a team than than most of the other normal types, but like once you do fit on the team, it causes destruction like nothing else. And also, like its aforementioned defensive utility is really good as well. Like it abuses the fuck out of the grass types of the tier, and using Rest Talk so that it doesn't even care about paralysis that much. And it can sometimes switch into Xatu. Now, it's not a great Xatu check because it takes a lot from Psychic and Hidden Power, and you also have to worry about double edge recoil. But the fact that it can, that it has the defensive utility of being able to threaten out of like revenge kill Xatu and like kind of 1v1 it in a pinch is absolutely amazing. Especially for well, it's not great. It's amazing for a Pokemon as threatening as Fearow. So yeah, that's Fearow for you. I also made like a very lengthy post in the GSC NU discussion thread about Fearow because I really like using this thing, and I'll put a link to it in the description. Next up, we have Dugtrio. This thing is also one of the most prominent late game cleaners in the tier. Compared to Fearow, it doesn't really have any true hard walls other than the grass types, other than like pure grass types, which are not really that common like at all, and are fairly abusable like most things in the tier. I think, and compared to Fearow, it also switches into Weezing. It also has more defensive utility in switching into Weezing, switching into random thunders from the likes of Chinchou, and also it can also in a pinch switch into like Hidden Power Rock from a predicted Hidden Power Rock or Rock Slide from Graveler or Sudowoodo. And yeah, this thing just it is the fastest mon in the tier, and its stab Earthquake is very threatening to the tier. With spikes up, Octillery and Dewgong are going to have a hard time switching into it, especially Octillery, by the way. And with sub up, it can scout the switch in so that if the Xatu switches in, it will know for sure when a Xatu switches in. Dugtrio is staple on its own team's archetype, as mentioned, the Xatu Dugtrio spikes, because Xatu, Dugtrio, and Pokemon like Fearow share a similar approach to check it like bulky waters. So like with their combined forces, like these bulky waters are going to have a really hard time standing up to Dug. And it's one of the main it's an amazing revenge killer. Like it can revenge kill a weakened Xatu in the pinch. Like it can seriously punish like hidden power electric variants of Xatu. Like if it comes in on a rest, then like it can be real bad for the Xatu player. And it actually can survive every 2 psychics from Xatu, so it can just barely win the 1v1. Which can't, and when you could combine that with Rock Slide's flinch chances, then it could be really nasty for Xatu. And it's similar dynamic for Octillery, like Hidden Power Electric Octillery, like as I mentioned before, like it's really bad against Dugtrio, and one of the reasons why Ice Beam is heavily considered on it, even though Ice Beam has some serious repercussions, like it can sometimes be worth it just for Dugtrio, which speaks to how good Dugtrio is. This thing kind of cleans house, and Dugtrio overall is fairly one-dimensional because it only really fits on Spike's teams, because I mentioned before, but it's fairly mediocre without Spikes. Like Octillery and Dewgong have a very easy time handling it without Spikes, but with Spikes, it's one of the most terrifying threats in the tier. Also, I forgot to mention this, but it can also use Swagger, which is very broken, and there are a lot of people right now who are advocating for a Swagger ban, and Dugtrio is why. Ban Swagger, GSC NU, and yeah. That's all guys ever dug. Next up, Dewgong. Dewgong is one of the most frustrating mons to deal with in the team builder. Like, if you look at one of the most common offensive structures in the tier, Xatu, Dugtrio, Pineco, and Octillery, they all struggle against Dewgong. Like, Hidden Power Electric, sure you could say like, oh, what about Hidden Power Electric Octillery? Well, it's not even close to 3 KOing Dewgong, so Dewgong can just rest loop it, and Dewgong constantly threatens it with an Ice Beam Freeze. And if Octillery tries to stay in and like pray for like a crit or something, then like Dewgong is just going to keep fishing for the freeze, and it's going to get it with like so many Ice Beams. It's going to fire off against Octillery. Yeah, Dewgong's bulk is pretty absurd. It is the best check in the game in the tier to Xatu, because it takes its Psychic like a champ and drains it out with Ice Beam. It is very good at checking Dugtrio. It does need to kind of worry about Rock Slide, because like Rock Slide does the same as EQ, but like most of the time it's not gonna go for it unless it's like desperate. And it is generally just a bulky, difficult to kill motherfucker in the tier. Checking Xatu, it's really to check Xatu compared to Octillery is very, very valuable, because Octillery just kind of sucks at it, especially with spiked up. And so on balance and defensive teams, you'll often see Dewgong over Octillery, because like these teams can oftentimes make up for Dewgong's lower power in comparison to Octillery, and more need its higher, more concrete Xatu checking and bulk in general. Dewgong in general though, Dewgong does kind of struggle with competing with Octillery. At one point, it was actually considered to be like the number 3 or even 2 in the tier before like Octillery like truly rose up to being as good as it is. But people have kind of realized that Dewgong is very, very passive in comparison to Octillery and lets in like a lot more key threats. Like Stantler, for example, is extremely dicey against Octillery, but is just fine against Dewgong, like the rest stock variant is, at least is. Same with Wigglytuff, Primeape to a degree, rest stock Persian as well, Kingler especially. Kingler is a really rough one. So as you can see, there are a decent number of very, very threatening Pokemon in the tier that Dewgong just sucks much more than Octillery against. But at the same time, Dewgong also has like issues with rock weaknesses and lack of a fire resistance. So Pokemon like Pupitar, Gravel, Sudowoodo really threaten it. Magmar is really bad for it. Saying that Ninetales actually wins the 1v1 versus it from that. But like, all of these are kind of like why Dewgong is, I'd say Dewgong is the bottom of A+, and is overall a decent bit worse than Octillery, but like, what Dewgong does is so valuable. What Dewgong's defensive utility is very, very valuable for certain teams, and overall more valuable than Octillery's offensive capabilities, so it's still a prominent member of the tier. And also checks like Weezing like far better than Octillery can. And also another thing I forgot to mention, its speed is weirdly high for what it wants to do. Like it outspeeds Weezing, which is huge, and it's mainly Weezing, but like outspeeding. Yeah, it's mainly Weezing, but like even that alone is very, very huge. Also, it outspeeds Pupitar as well, for what it's worth, and Flareon, I guess. Anyways, next up is Wigglytuff. Oh, I also forgot to mention that it can also use on process, but in my opinion they aren't great because you have to drop rest stock, so yeah. Also, another thing I need to mention was Hidden Power Grass and Protect. This thing is a monster when past the grows from Flareon. It's much better than that as a gross plus recipient than Octillery because of its speed and bulk. And like Octillery's extra power once that grows is kind of just overkill, but with Dewgong alongside its bulk, it is the perfect fit. Anyways, that's Octillery for you. I mean, that's Dewgong for you. Next up is Wigglytuff. Wigglytuff is a Pokemon that I honestly think is teetering on the edge of broken. Like, a lot of people say it's overrated. Like, and I kind of understand, but like, I think Curse Talk Wigglytuff is one of the most unfair sets in all of GSC NU. It's just absurd. This thing just like kind of just takes over games really fucking well. Like I have won games where I was seriously behind in my with Curse Talk Wigglytuff. Like look up the most recent GSC Grand Slam. Look at my first game. Look at how behind I was for a majority of the game, and then just Curse Talk Wigglytuff just comes in and just wins the game. What this thing does is genuinely absurd, and I would honestly not be against a ban. So now, yeah, because once it gets the opportunity, which it can get against like say like a resting Xatu or resting like Octillery, and then like especially Dewgong, then like it can so easily end games. It's unfair. What it does but like obviously it's not like perfect, and it has issues. The main issue is that it's not as great at checking like what it needs to check. Like it's not that great of a defensive Pokemon like overall, and like because it's slower than everything and has to rely on rest talk, and like it really struggles to switch into Pokemon like Xatu, and it really struggles to switch into Xatu. It spikes up, and then once it does, it immediately has to rest. So, and then like it can switch to stuff like decently, but like most of the time it's very dicey at doing so. Like Dugtrio can kind of do so, but it's very very dicey. Weezing, like maybe not Weezing, never mind. Really the only Pokemon it's like truly safe at switching into like Dewgong and Chinchou, like passive Pokemon in the tier, which is nice, especially Dewgong, and having a Pokemon that can take advantage of it can be really really nice for some sort of offensive teams. But the lack of defensive it's generally not great. Defensive utility is what holds it back in comparison to like other normal types in the tier, and because it's slow and needs to like rest a lot, it really struggles to be a consistent check too much in the tier. Like one thing you'll quickly learn with Wigglytuff is that like it is the like furthest thing from an Octillery switch in. Like I remember when I started GSC NU, like I remember I had this like game against like B, like when I was like very very new to the tier. I switched Wigglytuff into Octillery and just kind of got owned because Wigglytuff speed test Octillery, and Octillery just does too much to Wigglytuff with Surf. Like it cleanly drew KOs, and it's not offensively threatening enough to hit back in order for it to be worth the risk. It pretty much needs to come in as Octillery uses like rest, or like hidden power, and even then it's still very dicey, especially with spikes up. Like it can be okay at switching to Xatu if it comes in on a rest or it comes in on a hidden power. Like, but like against Octillery, it has no chance. Wigglytuff. Honestly, there's no. Also, Double Edge is the most important. Is like the best normal stat on it. its other options are Body Slam and Return. Body Slam, I know like people like Esterossa really advocate for it, but like in my opinion, just letting in Pineco can be like really, really bad. Like Double Edge guarantees a 3-hit KO, while Body Slam isn't even close. Although there are some nice attributes to Body Slam, like if it gets the Para on Pineco, then your own Pineco gets switched into the opposing Pineco. Like normally, Pineco can't switch into the opposing Pineco because the opposing Pineco gets a Speed Tie and just a Gloom on it. But when it's paralyzed, then your Pineco can switch into a paralyzed Pineco and guarantee a Spike up. But like the thing with Body Slam is that it's not guaranteed to get the Para on Pineco, so yeah. And whereas Double Edge, it's guaranteed to limit Pineco's opportunities versus you. Like with Double Edge, you basically ensure that the Pineco can only either get spiked or explode on you. Like if you run Body Slam or Return, then like Pineco is guaranteed or close to guaranteed like a spike and a Bloom on you, which is just really, really bad. And Return is just unviable. It's just unviable in my opinion. Double Edge does have recoils, and you do kind of need to deal with it. But like I think making Wigglytuff as immediately threatening as possible is just too important. There's not much else I gotta say about Wigglytuff. It is one of the most contentious mons in the tier. Like some people like me and Esterossa think it's like borderline broken, and like whereas like others like I think most of it are like I feel like this might be an unpopular opinion because like most other people will kind of just think it kind of sucks. So, like or I think it's overrated. Like people like Dawn, Gluten, and B also all think it's overrated. I think people are on a low key kind of underrating it, which is pretty absurd for its level. But I don't know. Maybe my experiences are just different from theirs. Yeah. And like also noting I gotta mention about Wigglytuff is that it is kind of prone to hacks because like it sets up like so many curses and is asleep all the time, so it's vulnerable to like psychic special defense drops and crits. But in my opinion, like if you need to rely on like I mean obviously you don't need to rely on it, but like since so many people like often resort to like trying to like hack through Wigglytuff, that is pretty unhealthy. I don't know. That's Wigglytuff for you. Next up we have Primeape. Primeape is another one of the most threatening Pokemon in the tier to be looking at full HP. Now you may first immediately notice that it does struggle with the two best Pokemon in the tier, Xatu and Weezing. However, both are the furthest thing from removable for several reasons. Like, Weezing doesn't use Rest Talk and Gimmicky sets aside and gets worn down by spikes, so it's not unrealistic for Primeape to just wear it down with repeated Thunders or Hidden Power Grounds if that's your taste. While Xatu does not really hates switching into Thunder and it can get paired and just like brute force through. And like those are just, and then like everything else, it just kind of just it's really good at crushing. Like look at these threats, like so many of like these threats like Stantler, Dugong, Wigglytuff, like just get crushed by its cross chop. And like most of the tier just kind of like hates eating its cross chop really. And Primeape uses Substitute to guarantee it hits the opponent with a correct move. And Primeape has possibly one of the highest ceilings in the tier, like if not the highest ceiling honestly, like especially with cross chop's high critical hit rate. But it is possibly the most likely Pokemon in the game to get cheesed. Because, the most likely Pokemon in GSC NU to get cheesed. Because Cross Chop and Thunder have poor accuracy and it needs to rely on hitting multiple of them during the course of a game. So, and So oftentimes, like Primeape, you're kind of just like playing the watery with Primeape all the time. A lot of people like Esterossa like really hate it for that reason, because like even if you play super well with it, it can just like miss and just completely ruin you. And so yeah, if Primeape's moves had 100% accuracy, it would be so much better and might even be ban worthy. Other than that, it also has some other issues, like Gloom is a big issue for it, because it, unlike Weezing, it actually runs recovery, but Gloom is fairly passive and isn't on every team, so it is manageable. It also struggles a lot with giving opportunities to Pineco, but I mean, there are ways around it, especially since Weezing. Primeape often gets. Primeape is often seen like the balance teams, like the Gravel Gloom balance teams. Another set you can run with Primeape that isn't this set is Restock. Because with Restock, you consistently switch into Dewgong. You can decently switch into the rock types, although not great, but like it's mainly Dewgong you want to take advantage of, because especially as like on like the Gravel Gloom like balance teams that like it so commonly gets paired on. Both Graveler and Gloom really hate Dewgong, so Primeape just comes in and takes advantage of it. It also can somewhat decently check Restock Stantler. That's Primeape for you. High risk, high reward. Next up is Graveler. Rapid Spin is I'd say one of the best moves in GSC because of how prominent spikes are, and for that reason Graveler is a staple on balance and stall teams. Because a lot of the defensive members that Pokemon that Graveler often gets paired with really love it when there's no spikes on the field. And Pokemon like Dewgong is a lot of really dangerous defensive Pokemon like Dugtrio, Xatu, and to a lesser degree Fearow becomes so much easier to handle without spikes on the field. And also Graveler is really good in the sense that it walls Fearow, which is otherwise very difficult for a lot of teams to handle. Graveler is also very offensively threatening in its own right, its Earthquake and Hidden Power Rock coverage hits the entire tier for solid damage, except for the pure grass types, which are generally not great. And it also uses Hidden Power Rock, by the way, because Rock Slide and Rapid Spin are illegal on the same set. And just like Weezing, it has Explosion. The strongest explosion in the tier, by the way. Beating Weezing up by I believe 5 stat points. Let me check. 5 attack. Yeah, beats Weezing up by 5 attack. Anyways, Graveler main flaw is that it gets completely crushed by it's 4 times weak to water, so it needs to consistently run away from Octillery and Dewgong, which are both of which are, I'd say, pretty much mandatory on most serious GSC NU teams. And it has poor special bulk, which means Xatu deals a lot to it. Xatu was also a really big issue for it because it can't really spam EQ with Xatu around. And also, a lot of Pokemon that it would otherwise check, like Weezing, can run Hidden Power Water to crush it, and Pineco, and also Pineco kind of adapted to its presence by running Toxic, which really cripples it and prevents it from spinning in the long term. But Graveler can adapt back because it can choose to like not switch into Pineco, instead find an opportunity to get Rapid Spin somewhere else, like on a different Pokédrons, like again Fearow or like Wigglytuff. And yeah, Graveler, the main team you go to see Graveler on is balance teams, as Gloom and Dewgong. It's kind of called like a triple G because Gravel, Gloom, Gong, or yeah, it's a prominent balance team. A lot of players some players like Mr. Soup and I believe Gluten have kind of like, I don't know if it was Mr. Soup that kind of pioneered Graveler. It might have, I don't know, but like, I know Gluten like spammed the hell out of it and just wouldn't shut up about it in the GSC Discord. But yeah, the Graveler and what Graveler does is great, and it's a staple balance, and it's before like it was also kind of never mind, I was gonna say something else, but yeah, that's Graveler for you. Next up is Persian. Gnosis Thief. Persian is the most threatening lead in GSC NU, and it is almost guaranteed to do something in the lead slot. Like it's not even easy Pokemon to anti-lead. Your only real anti-lead measures are like Miracle Berry, Pineco, and like the very gimmicky Restock Sudowoodo. Persian. Like Persian just threatens. Persian's Hypnosis is very threatening because it does big damage to pretty much every Restocker in the tier. Like Xatu struggles to take it, Octillery struggles to take it, Dewgong. Dewgong takes it better, but like with Screech, Persian can just break through. Yeah, and it also uses Thief on the Restock sets, and pretty much every Restocker absolutely hates eating a Thief, but they have to like eat the Thief because like the other like physically bulky ones in the tier like Weezing and Graveler do not run Restock, meaning that Persian basically comes out with a win-win. You kind of need to like theoretically you could like sacrifice Restock or Xatu or Octillery to Hypnosis and then bring in your physical Pokemon, but then you realize that Persian can simply just not click Hypnosis against these monsters and just focus on doing as big damage as possible. Like a Deep Xatu is still very exploitable. But I guess Persian, Elite Persian, it's kind of just like a pick your poison kind of thing. Persian's main flaws is that like Hypnosis accuracy can be pretty bad. Like it can sometimes fumble if you absolutely need to hit it. And also Persian can sometimes be hard to fit because it doesn't offer like defensive utility, much defensive utility at all. And a lot of offensive teams kind of so. It can be a very awkward one to fit, but beyond that, like this thing and the lead slot is very unfair and very difficult to handle. Another set that people are running is Restock Persian. I honestly don't know enough about this set to really talk. Honestly, like when I use it, I thought it was kind of bad, but. Basically, it kind of like mimics Fearow, except it's not weak to Dugtrio. But it is notably weaker than Fearow. Like 70 attack compared to 90 is a pretty big, fairly significant drop off, and it also And it also has a lot more trouble against Pineco because Fearow has Drill Peck, but this set definitely has potential. I think it could be nice alongside Fearow because it handles Dewgong and Chinchou for it. If you're going to run alongside Fearow, you might want to run... I don't know about Bubble Beam though, because Xatu, and you want to hit Xatu. Maybe hit Fire Ice? I don't know. Yeah, also there's also Sub-Squeeze Persian, but in my opinion that's mostly outclassed by Dugtrio because Dugtrio has actual resistances and hits shit super effectively. Other than that, it could be nice alongside Dugtrio though, maybe. I already tried it, it wasn't great, but maybe someone else can make it work, I don't know. That's Persian for you. Chinchou. Next up is Chinchou. I'm not gonna lie, when I started playing this tier, I legitimately thought Chinchou was like top 10 or top 5 because a lot of teams I used were super weak to it, and a lot of teams are kind of weak to it, honestly, but Chinchou is heavily flawed, as you'd expect from an NFE. What Chinchou does is that it is the hardest counter in the tier to the water types, Octillery and Dewgong. It doesn't really care about anything that it has to throw at them and can actually offensively threaten them back with Thunder. And it's threatening to a lot of other Pokemon. Its coverage is threatening to a lot of other Pokemon in the tier. Like, when you look at the standard Xatu team, core team like Xatu, Dugtrio, Pineco, and Octillery, all of them really hate facing Chinchou. A lot of times these teams' best bet against Chinchou is like Dugtrio, and they need to like really try to avoid switching it into a Surf. I think doing Surf is relatively riskless because like it can just switch into Octillery and Dewgong and just draw off a Surf, protecting a Dugtrio to switch in, because it's relatively riskless because like even if it messes with decks and like one of these two stay in, then like it loses almost nothing. Like they're not gonna damage it hard anyways. But yeah, Chinchou's issues is that like if it doesn't hit it super effectively, it's going to like anything that it doesn't hit super effectively, it kind of just like does like nothing to. Like Restock, which means it's complete food for Restock Stantler, Restock Wigglytuff, even Primeape. It's also complete food for Gloom, which is right. So Chinchou, you do kind of need to be careful with team building around because you do need to figure out a way to how to like deal with these threats. But and also Dugtrio. But what it does is very unique and is very much worse team building around. And also it enables you to use Ice Beam Octillery, which arguably has a higher ceiling than Electric Octillery. Next up is Flareon, which World's Best Flareon is one of the most broken Ghost Pass Flareon can end games like almost nothing else in the tier can. Like you go back to the Envirograss Dewgong set I mentioned earlier, and like what are they gonna do? And I think some people in this tier some people in this community think it's like borderline broken. I don't know if B like would advocate for a ban on it, but I know he thinks that like it's broken, but yeah, what Ghost Pass Flareon does is pretty absurd. It's good special bulk, means that they can get up gross against like Xatu and like general just sleeping mons in general. Except for the water types obviously, but Flareon's flaws is that like without recovery it doesn't always get the best opportunities to get up a gross and pass. And also like especially against with Octillery being such a prominent part of the tier, like if your opponent is smart, they can maneuver Octillery on the tier and like consistently deny Flareon the opportunity to get him a pass. And Dugtrio as well, and Doug is even worse for it because it outspeeds and hits it hard with Earthquake. But and also it has to worry about spikes because if it dips, because like dipping into a bad HP range can just let it get swept up by an Octillery Surf. And also, like, as daunting as a +1 Dewgong is, it isn't like completely game ending, and like, but yeah, Flareon is pretty absurd as it goes faster. Also, there's also been people running sets like mixed with Double Edge, like you drop growth and run like Double Edge, and I don't know what the last move is, but I think some people like War. I haven't experimented with this set, and it does seem like it kind of struggles with longevity issues, but I think it sounds like it could work well. Another set I saw, I think in like the World Cup, was like Restock Flareon. Compared to the other Restock Fire types, it notably hits Octillery the hardest with its massive attack and Double Edge. Fun fact, I think like a Flareon Double Edge does as much as like a Wigglytuff Double Edge. Fun fact. So Octillery is gonna have a hard time switching into it, but compared to the other Restock Fire types and Flareon and Ninetales and Ninetales and Rapidash, it's overall much worse as a Xatu check because it's slower and also has some other issues, such as being like much worse against Weezing due to its relatively poor bulk. But I think this is a pretty cool set that I think deserves more exploration. Kingler, honestly, Kingler can threaten huge damage with Sword Stance and Double Edge, and Kingler is another one, another example of an extremely dangerous Pokemon that is mostly kept in check by Xatu, because Xatu just deals huge damage to it with Psychic, and I'm pretty sure +2 Double Edge does not come close to OHKOing it, so Xatu can very commonly just like neutralize the threat, even if it costs like most of its HP. That's why, in order to properly prepare for a Kingler, in order to ensure Kingler can like break a hole or even just sleep, you need anti-Xatu measures, and one of the most common ones is actually Houndour. Houndour plus Kingler is one of the most common ways to use Kingler, and if you're not doing that, then I believe that the best way is Sword Stance and Hidden Power Rock, because that I think comes close to guaranteeing the OHKO after a Sword Stance. And if it doesn't, I think it's like you only need just like side chip damage to get it, which is very realistic given how often Xatu is used throughout the game. But yeah, so the Hidden Power Rock Kingler set can act as a great lure for Xatu and really make it easier on your team. But the slightly more common set is you usually see like Hidden Power Ground instead of Hidden Power Rock, and then something else in the last set, like say where's it? Hidden Power Ground. And something like Protect in the last stop for extra leftovers recovery, or even Sub. And Kingler has a decent amount of like setup opportunities in the tier. Like it completely shits on Dewgong. It's high defensive to take hits from like Dugtrio, and also just general resting on the general like Octillery. Like yeah, Octillery has Hidden Power Electric, but A, it doesn't always run it, and B, like most Octillery users aren't going to want to try to fish for the sleep talking Hidden Power Electric once it rests and Kingler is in. Yeah, and then also another big issue for Kingler is Weezing, and because if it's not running Hidden Power Ground, then like Weezing just kind of just shits on it, and can explode to emergency stop a sweep. But if you're not running Hidden Power Rock, then you're gonna struggle against Xatu, so kind of a lose-lose. If we could run both, then I think it would be interesting if we could run both, honestly, but sadly we can't. Kingler is honestly a lot, compared to like a lot of the other win conditions in the tier, it's honestly a lot harder to make work out of, but it is threatening enough to where, which is why I put it at like the bottom of A minus, and it might honestly deserve to be in B plus. Honestly, I think I'll probably switch the placements of Kingler and like Porygon or Gloom, but I don't know. Maybe I just haven't experimented enough with it, and it's still like it can still do a lot in a game. All right, next up, Gloom. Gloom is Gluten's favorite, and well, no, Graveler is, but I digress. But Gloom's defensive utility is very, very unique within the tier. It counters the Hidden Power Electric variants of Octillery, Primeape. It can kind of check Dugtrio, but it's not great at it. But it can also check Chinchou. Its Hidden Power Grass threatens out like Graveler, Sudowoodo, Pupitar. It includes just on Hitmonlee as well. All of which is not a bad list of Pokemon to be threatening out. It can also be annoying for non-Fearow variants of Weezing. And for all of this, it spreads paralysis with Sunspore, and if it hits a Xatu with Sunspore, it can be like very, very beautiful for the likes of like Weezing or even Primeape. And yeah, Gloom is very flawed in the sense that it's like extremely passive and thus has a really big issue with letting in Pineco, which is why when you see Gloom, is very often going to be paired with Graveler, so that because like basically like any Poke that struggles with letting in Pineco can usually pair well with Graveler. Which is mostly one, and which has become known as the kind of Gravel Gloom core in the tier. And Sunspore also benefits Gravel really well because it allows it to outspeed Xatu and just doesn't need to guess when it's going to switch in because it can immediately threaten with Hidden Power Rock. Gloom's issues are more than just letting in Pineco. Like letting in Xatu and Fearow is really bad as well, but for its defensive, and also it generally struggles to leave that much of a lasting mark with the Sludge Bombs because it struggles to deal damage for the most part because of the big bad Xatu that constantly forces out, and even also Fire Blast and Weezing as well. And also generally just Rest Talkers can just kind of destroy it all day, but it has ways of, but like it's not really supposed to be like an offensive threat. Like its teammates can deal with can usually just deal with the threats that it lets in, and they all love its process support, as well as it providing a safety net against like various threats. So yeah, that's Gloom for you. Another thing to note is that like the last thought is for your grass stab you can also run Razor Leaf because over Hidden Power Grass because it doesn't cut into your DBs. Giga is an option, but like it fails against a substitute, so it kind of sucks. I know some people have tried running like Curse or even like Swords Dance, but in my opinion those are kind of bad because I mean, Curse can, like, I guess be threatening against Weezing and maybe Stantler, but it's... yeah, they're just not great, in my opinion. Next up, we have Porygon. Recover is a broken-ass move in this tier. I mean, broken-ass move in GSC as a whole. Like, 32 PP is pretty absurd. I do not know what Game Freak was thinking when they made this, gave it 32 PP, but... whatever. Yeah, Porygon does a lot of what Gloom does, and one thing this was never mentioned to me, by the way, one fun fact, one thing that I never noticed until Guten pointed it out, was that Porygon and Gloom's stat spreads are almost exactly the same. Really, the one difference is that their HP and attack are swapped. Yeah, it's a pretty funny thing that I never noticed until Guten pointed it out. Yeah, so Porygon, what it does, it spreads process with the wave just like Gloom does. It's annoying with recover, and it has good coverage and does a nice beam. It's not... compared to the likes of Wigglytuff, it is overall better as a Xatu check, because it can then if it switches in, then like it can just like Thunder Wave and then go for the recover, unlike Wigglytuff, who has to immediately rest. But it's still not great though, especially with spikes up, but it can work in a pinch, and it also more concrete. It also just like Wigglytuff, it also threatens Dewgong with Thunder, and it also threatens Dewgong because Dewgong is passive, and compared to and it's just generally just good at spraying process, especially since Dugtrio doesn't want to eat its Ice Beam. One big flaw of Porygon in comparison to Wigglytuff is that it can't take advantage of like Gloom and Chinchou, while Wigglytuff can, because Porygon uses Recover, which doesn't heal status, meaning that like while Wigglytuff doesn't care about getting status by either Chinchou or Gloom. And a paralyzed Porygon is pretty much useless, because that means it can't recover stall on Xatu anymore. Yeah. So both these factors do mean that Porygon is overall harder to fit than Wigglytuff, because with Wigglytuff you'd want like a reverse targeting normal to be able to handle Gloom and Chinchou, and Porygon just can't do that. So, but on certain teams it can definitely work out well. Especially teams that like especially for Pokemon that like really enjoy process support. Also, another set that Porygon can run is Curse Double Edge, acting similarly to Curse Rest Wigglytuff. This set, compared to Wigglytuff, Thunder Wave and Recover means that like it's harder to like try to like chase, because it's overall harder to cheese, and because Thunder Wave can like can curb cheese odds, crit odds, but compared to Wigglytuff, compared to Wigglytuff, it's like the Curse Rest Wigglytuff, it's much more vulnerable to status. Like, if it gets like paralyzed or if you have like Toxic Pineco, then it's basically just ruined. And also it's way weaker than Wigglytuff, because and with 60 attack instead of 70, so it's way harder for it to like boost up to be a threat. And also has all those other same issues like Wigglytuff, like explosion and yeah. But if you can deal with these issues, like this thing is one where like Curse Porygon, similar to Wigglytuff, can be one of the most unfair Pokemon to be unfair Pokemon in the tier. Hitmonlee. Hitmonlee, compared to Primeape, Hitmonlee is a lot weaker despite its higher attack because Primeape has a much stronger stab. But it makes use of Restock better overall because of its high special bulk. It takes advantage of Dewgong all day, and it's even better at like the other aforementioned like Restock normal types of doing so because it immediately threatens it out with its stab, and also threatens Octillery better than the other Restock normal types because it outspeeds it. Well, except for Stantler, but like it's obviously still pretty dicey against Octillery, but like it can work in a pinch. A pinch if you get it in on a rest or hidden power. Yeah, its fighting stab is generally very threatening to the tier because there are a lot of fighting weak Pokemon, as you can see here. Its main issues is that it struggles against Xatu. Like it needs to run hidden power rock, but even then, like Xatu outspeeds it and deals a huge chunk to it with Psychic. And also hidden power rock is also necessary, so it's not complete Pineco food. Even beyond Xatu, there's also the even probably bigger issue of Weezing, who just completely shits on it all day, and which is why you kind of need to fit on what's like one of the few like Weezing like counters like Ninetales or to a lesser degree Dugong. So it is a lot hard to fit onto a team in that regard. But the defensive utility it does bring to a team is very well appreciated, and it's like also like overall compared to like overall generally pretty threatening while doing so, while providing that defensive utility. Also, something to note is that some people were like running Bison or Hidden Power Rock on Hitmonlee to spread paralysis. I've never really liked it because like even if you like get a paralysis on Xatu, it's kind of just like whatever because like okay, you paralyze a Pokemon that does like jack shit to you, like big deal. I guess it can paralyze Weezing, which can be nice, but I just never really liked Bison, Hitmonlee. Also, it just makes a complete Pineco food as well. Pupitar. Pupitar is a Pokemon who, like, a lot of people have had like a much higher opinion of lately. Like, it's kind of started to rise in people's VRs. And a lot of people think it kind of has like a resurgence too. What Pupitar does, compared to the other rock types of the tier, is that it outspeeds Octillery. Like, Octillery is already kind of dicey into Graveler because it takes a shit ton from its Earthquake and also has to risk the explosion. And also, but it's even worse against Pupitar because Pupitar just outspeeds. So Octillery practically has to be like high or close to high house in order to be able to consistently check it. Dewgong, on the other hand, outspeeds Pupitar, but struggles a lot more with switching in thanks to Rock Slide. Another big thing Pupitar has over the other rock types is Screech. What this does is basically let it completely counter the cursed normal types, Wigglytuff and Porygon, and because Screech ensures that it will always be able to hit it hard enough to kill them, which is very, very valuable. Pupitar is fairly threatening with process support. If you could get on Xatu with Pokemon like say Porygon or Gloom, then Pupitar can go wild pretty hard. Can go pretty wild, and yeah, but it is still very flawed as a rock type because compared to Graveler, it doesn't have Explosion, it doesn't have Rapid Spin, and also it's much less physically bulky than Graveler, meaning that like it's gonna be a lot dicier against Fearow. But its attributes are still very good, and I think it's going to find its way onto more teams as time goes by. Sudowoodo. I'm gonna be honest, I've never been a real big Sudowoodo fan, like especially nowadays where I feel like Graveler is getting better and better to the point where it does kind of feel like Sudowoodo kind of just isn't great. Like, yeah, it's strong. It technically has a higher attack stat than Graveler, but like Graveler is effectively stronger thanks to Stab Earthquake, and also Graveler attacks Weezing much better thanks to actually being immune to Thunder. It spins away spikes. It's honestly it's kind of hard to say that Sudowoodo is a better check to Fearow than Graveler is, despite the fact that like Sudowoodo has higher defense. Because like if Sudowoodo is going to be consistently being ravaged by spikes and Graveler isn't, then like it would honestly be easier for Fearow to wear down Graveler than Sudowoodo. I don't know, maybe I'm being too harsh on it, honestly. Compared to Graveler, its much higher special defense makes it much better using Curse, because like Xatu is gonna be more scared of it after a Curse, and and it can launch some fairly decently strong attacks, and it's also better against hidden power water variants of Weezing than Graveler is. And of course, when in doubt, it can explode. Honestly, I don't really have much else to say about Sudowoodo. I've never really liked it. I've tried it. It disappointed me, but I'm sure like someone else who's used Sudowoodo can vouch for it. But I don't know, just not me. Ninetales. Ninetales is it has great upsides. Like it is one of the best checks to two of the best mons in the tier, Xatu and Weezing. Like, and that alone, like you would think would like make it a top tier poke, but like it has a lot of issues outside of that. Like hard countering Xatu and Weezing while also being a solid check to shit like Gloom, check to like Gloom and also Magmar as well is real nice until you realize that a certain little bitch called Octillery exists. As mentioned earlier, like letting in like one of the most threatening mons in the tier is really bad, and thus it kind of makes like Ninetales a bit harder to team build with. Because like there are ways around it. Like with Toxic, Ninetales can like kind of limit Octillery's ability to switch into it, and also force rest from it, which can be abused. And forcing rest obviously can be abused by a lot of Pokemon in the tier. And Toxic in general can be really nice. If it lures and grab, then like Fearow can go berserk, for example, and also gives an emergency stop to the likes of Ice Cream, Curse Stantler, and Curse Porygon. But like overall, it is still Octillery is still so much of a bitch to handle that like Ninetales oftentimes is just too difficult to team build with. Octillery isn't even the only issue. Like Dewgong can be an issue, and Doug also outspeeds and does huge damage to it. So like you kind of like with putting Ninetales on a team, you kind of solve two problems, but you add so much more. Is kind of the way I see it. Now the thing that I think like could like be the resurgence of Ninetales, and I think like the main set that like that could really help it is Sunny Day. What this does is that it completely neuters Octillery for a while. Like it doesn't let it 1v1 it by any stretch of the imagination, but what it does do is allow your teammates to switch into it. Pineco getting up spikes on Octillery is a thing of just absolute beauty. Restock Stantler also really can also switch into it much more easily under Sun. And but you can't really switch like Dugtrio into Octillery. Like even Dugtrio just being able to take even just one hit from Octillery can be game breaking. And Curse Talk Wigglytuff also really enjoys neutered Octillery. Obviously, Sunny Day is still pretty flawed because it's only has 8 PP, it only lasts 5 turns, and it still doesn't let Ninetales break concretely threaten Octillery by itself, and plus it just kind of just goes away in 5 turns. But I think it's like one of the more concrete ways that you can use Ninetales in this day and age. It's still definitely a bit more specific than Toxic, because you do kind of like need like true abusers with Sunny Day in order to truly take advantage of it. But I think it's what's going to like really help Ninetales these days. Magmar. I'm not gonna lie, you probably shouldn't like take my rating of Magmar to heart, because I honestly have no idea where to rate this thing. Like, you know, the thing with Magmar is that like I have faced it like about 2 or 3 times throughout my entire GSC NU career, and like 2 of the times I destroyed it, and 1 of the times I got destroyed by it. Magmar is extremely threatening into balanced and defensive teams. Like especially balanced teams that use Dewgong over Octillery can just kind of get owned by it. But the thing with Magmar is team building it with it is really, really, really difficult. Like, you thought team building with Ninetales was hard enough. Try team building with Ninetales, except it doesn't even check Xatu or Weezing. Like, its defensive utility is basically null. And you gotta account for its Dugtrio weakness. You gotta account for like putting into Octillery. It's rough. Making a good Magmar team is rough. Like you can truly never make a satisfactory one. But like when it comes to like crushing balance and defense, you don't really get much better than Magmar, honestly. Yeah, I don't really have much else to say. I haven't really used Magmar, honestly, and I've almost never faced it. And I kind of don't want to use Magmar because it's so hard to team build with, but I'm sure it's decent. I'm sure I can put in work. Anyways, Dunsparce. The thing with Dunsparce, though, is that like it is like it's Curse Restock set is almost identical to Wigglytuff because like they have the exact same attack stat, they have the exact same speed. Their bulk is almost identical. Like Dunsparce takes physical attacks like slightly better, while Wigglytuff takes special attacks slightly better. But the difference is like very minimal most of the time. And then, but there's just one issue here, is that Dunsparce cannot learn Double Edge or Body Slam because they're Gen 1 TMs, while Wigglytuff can, which, in my opinion, is just too big. It's just too big to make Curse Restock Dunsparce worth using over Wigglytuff most of the time, because like even if for some reason you wanted to use a return on like Wigglytuff, which I don't recommend, you still most of the time wouldn't want to sub it out for Dunsparce because a higher special bulk probably makes more of a difference in most cases, and B, like maybe I don't actually know if that's correct, but I guess it depends. And B, like your opponent knows for sure that like you can switch their Pineco into it, because like with Wigglytuff, it's like your opponent knows there is a chance of double edge, so your opponent needs to be a bit more. Opponent's might be a bit more hesitant to switch Pineco in, because then if it switches into a double edge Wigglytuff directly into a double edge, it'll only be able to get up spikes and not explosion. But I guess Dunsparce, it knows for a fact it's completely free to come in and get up spikes and potentially launch a boom. Another thing Dunsparce has over Wigglytuff is Glare, which notably has a benefit of paralyzing Dugtrio, but Glare is kind of ass because it's 75% accuracy. It's 75% accurate, and also and you could hypothetically just use Thunder Wave Wigglytuff if you really wanted to, and also you can try a Curse Glare set, but like I don't know, I mean, first of all, Wigglytuff can also theoretically use Curse Thunder Wave, and also have Double Edge on it, and also and also without Rest Talk, you also are gonna struggle with being taken advantage of mostly. I don't know. Like, maybe I'm being too harsh on it. Like, I think some people might have be able to make really good use of it, but I don't know. It just doesn't seem that great to me. Magnemite. Magnemite is like the best Pokemon in the tier that still completely sucks ass. Sort of like maybe Ninetales, but I don't know if you would call Ninetales like sucking ass, but being the only steel type in the tier, Magnemite can check Xatu and Fearow decently while growing off. Admittingly, it's kind of difficult to switch into having thunders that aren't that easy to switch into in general, and staying alive with Rest Talk. The issue with Magnemite is its stats. 25 HP. Its steel typing is not enough to make up for base 25 HP, and beyond that, and which means that it struggles to switch into even Pokemon that should be checking like Xatu and Fearow with spikes up, and also it just kind of just gets taken advantage of by a lot of Pokemon. Like even Curse, think of all the Pokemon that take advantage of Chinchou, like say Rest Talk, Stantler, Wigglytuff, Wigglytuff Gloom to a lesser degree, and are all really big issues for Magnemite. But it but the Dugtrio issue is even worse for Magnemite than it is for Chinchou, because Chinchou at least runs it with Stab, while Magnemite's Hidden Power Ice is like, what, I think it's like a 3-hit KO. So, resting Magnemite is complete food for Dugtrio. And even not resting, like Magnemite needs to predict the Dugtrio switch. And it's entirely in the Dugtrio's favor because, because launching a Hidden Power Ice and just dudding it into like a switch in like Wigglytuff just kind of sucks, and B, if it gets it wrong, then even if the Dug user gets it wrong, it's still not the end of the world compared to like if it gets it wrong for the Chinchou. Yeah, Magnemite has a lot of offensive potential, and defensive utility is nice, but yeah, it's really flawed. Houndour. Houndour is what you get when like your sole purpose is to beat the best one in the tier. Well, one of the best ones in the tier. With Pursuit, Houndour gets rid of Xatu, and Xatu can't really hit it hard because it doesn't use Drill Peck, and so it's relatively riskless to get the Pursuit off. And there are a decent amount of Pokemon that really abuse Xatu being gone, like Restock Stantler really likes it, Primeape really likes it, Weezing really likes it, Kingler really likes it. All these Pokemon can go pretty ham once Xatu is gone, but the thing is, Houndour just completely sucks ass outside of pursuing Xatu. Like, it's complete. Like, once. Like, it's blending against Xatu, sure, but like, in any other matchup, you're like welcome to see it. Like, the best they could do is just like set up Sunny Day so that Octillery is much less threatening, but like beyond that, like it just doesn't like do anything. And sometimes removing Xatu isn't like so concrete of a niche to justify what's essentially a dead slot outside of it. Exeggcute. Exeggcute is unique in that it checks Hidden Power Electric, Octillery, and Xatu, spreads paralysis, and explodes. Compared to Gloom, it immediately threatens Weezing, it has Explosion, and it threatens Weezing like much more, has Explosion. Also, the hard counter is Dugtrio compared to Gloom because it's not weak. It actually resists Earthquake. Exeggute's flaws is that like it struggles with longevity because while it does have Moonlight and Synthesis, both are actually illegal as Explosion. So that's kind of like a pick your poison. Like, do you want to be passive as hell, or do you want to struggle with longevity? And that's not an easy decision to make. It also, its special defense is also fairly poor, so like it can a lot of times not actually be as good as I did want versus Octillery, and it also also compared to also Gloom can actually do more than a decent chunk to Xatu with such. They do more than like can actually like somewhat hurt Xatu back with Sludge Bomb, whereas like Exeggcute just doesn't do anything to it. But yeah, Exeggcute might also be underrated, and it could be kind of nice, but Mike could be underrated. It could be nice, but I don't know. I haven't like faced it enough to truly say on that matter. I'm not really gonna go over the B- and C mons because they're mostly just gimmicks. But I'll just go briefly over them. Like I'll get like 1 sentence summaries. Rockdash has a niche over Ninetales in the sense that like double edge. It has a strong double edge to hit Octillery and Dewgong, but its lower bulk means it's much worse against Xatu and doesn't really check Weezing. Dragonair is very specific mon for that sets up screens so that Gross Pass Flareon can get the pass off. And it's nice at doing that because Thunder Wave and also it threatens Pineco's Fire Blast. Raticate is strictly outclassed by Fearow and Persian, but it's nice to work alongside them, especially with Fearow because it can Super Fang the rock types. Shuckle is the mainstay on stall and prevents this playstyle from automatically losing to cursed normal types, as well as especially Stantler and also Fearow. But it only really works on stall because it's passive as hell, and stall kind of sucks in this tier because this tier is extremely offensive. Bayleaf and Tangela, both notably hard counter Dugtrio and are used on stall to prevent stall from auto losing to Doug, but both are passive as hell, and both don't even have stun spore, so both, especially Tangela, struggle to accomplish much against Xatu and Weezing. Ghastly hard walls curse normal types and can be decently threatening with high special attack and thunder and fire ice and explosion, but it just gets run over by like most of the top threats in the tier, like Xatu, Dugtrio, and all that. Farfetch attempts to set up agility and sword stance and baton pass to like Cubone, who to potentially end the game, but both of them are like very frail, so it's also very difficult to find an opportunity to get the pass off. Ninetales is an interesting option for a cursed normal type because it has very high special defense, which also takes Xatu's hits very well, but is extremely weak and not at all immediately threatening, unlike something like Wigglytuff, especially since it doesn't have double edge in this gen because there's no TM for it. Sneasel hard counters Xatu and it's great against Dewgong as well because it's immune to freezes. And it can use Screech to threaten out Dewgong and his Moonlight, but Sneasel is extremely weak, and like if it faces like a Weezing, like it just does nothing. And it also lets in Pineco. So for compared to the other pure grass types, it has Gross, but like it's never pulling off like a Gross Whip with its speed and grass being resisted by so many top threats. Porygon attempts to pull off like Level Kiss and Belly Drum shenanigans, but in a high-powered offensive metagame like this, that's really difficult to do, and it still gets outsped by Xatu, Fearow, and Dugtrio. Azumarill, I genuinely have no idea how it's ranked as NU. It like Fearow just does nothing. Like even on stall, you'd rather just want Dewgong, honestly. And that's it. I've been rambling for too long. If you disagree with any of these placements, please let me know in the comments. We can have like a nice discussion about this. GSC NU is very heavily argued about. A lot of people have like extremely differentiating opinions on this, and it's kind of it's probably the case for like most minutes, honestly. And yeah, that's about it. Hope you enjoyed. See ya.